Work Package 1 of EU IDEA will connect differentiated integration to history. We want to do this in a number of ways. We want to use history as a source of analogies to draw lessons for differentiated integration today. We want to look at history also as a source of genealogies, investigating the causes of differentiated integration. But we also want to look at intellectual history and history in a comparative dimension. Work Package 1 will have 3 tasks that will correspond to 3 deliverables. The first one is an analysis of differentiated integration as it has developed through history, through the history of politics and institutions of Europe, looking particularly at the concept of crisis. Crisis as a cause, but also as a consequence of differentiated integration. This will result in a research paper. And so will the second task, which will look at differentiated integration through the lens of intellectual history. We'll look at the history of European political thought to see what has been said more or less explicitly vis-à-vis differentiation by theorists, scholars, political thinkers. The idea is to problematize this concept and look at the opportunities but also the challenges vis-à-vis the unity of Europe, the solidarity and the political community of Europe. Finally, for the third task, which will result in a policy paper, we will look at differentiated integration through the lenses of 3 comparative cases from outside Europe, Mercosur, the African Union and ASEAN. The idea is to look at these 3 cases to draw lessons for differentiated integration in Europe and to understand the challenges of it, especially vis-à-vis questions of accountability and legitimacy, questions of effectiveness and cooperation.
For the next 3 years, I'm going to look into the broader questions of narratives on European constitutionalism and identity within the project of EU IDEA. I'm very happy to do so because with regards to the growing heterogeneity among the member states, it is very important to also see how European integration is still possible. And differentiated integration is perceived part of the solution of how to go further. But then the question is, and our aim of understanding is in how far the state of differentiated integration within the European Union can affect the narrative for the future of European integration. So we have different research questions that we deal with. The first one is, what is the narrative of Europe united in diversity? What are the main components? How is it constructed? And then in the second step, we really look into in how far differentiation can change the narrative on political unity and legal uniformity. And then in the third step also regarding to European identity. With that, we try to assess the prospects of differentiated integration in relation to European integration.
The European Policy Centre will coordinate work in the context of the EU IDEA project on the interaction between the Brexit process and differentiated integration or disintegration in the EU context. We will look at different policy areas, developments in economic and social affairs, on migration and justice issues, on foreign security and defense policies, and see how flexible cooperation within the European Union and cooperation between the European Union and third countries are affected by the ongoing process of Brexit and by the way in which a final deal between the UK and the EU will be at some point defined. On top of that, we will try to draw some more general lessons as to the implications of the Brexit process and experience and outcome for larger prospects of flexible cooperation within the Union, and in particular for how the European Union will frame relationships with important partners in its neighborhood. We believe that these relationships will remain different ones depending on the willingness and ability of different partners to be associated and closely cooperate with the European Union. But clearly the Brexit process will provide useful insights will provide let's say, innovation in shaping these sort of partnerships across a range of issues, including, for example, security affairs.
Yes, the working package 4 is about differentiated integration in the EMU and in the single market. What we are going to look is EMU and other parts of economic policy at the EU. On EMU, it's normally presented as the most developed form of integrated differentiation, but actually there are very different arrangements within the EU EMU governance, and they are very different. Some of them are treaty-based differentiation, others like the ECB or monetary policy, others are much more softer or intergovernmental. We have now the European Stability Mechanism, for instance. Some of them are only for the Eurozone countries, others are open to non-Eurozone countries. So already is looking at the different types of arrangements we have and compare them in terms of efficiency, legitimacy, accountability, cohesiveness. That's one of the parts of the task of our working package. Another one is about going abroad. We know that we are still in an ongoing process of reform of the Economic and Monetary Union, and there are different visions of how to deepen the Economic and Monetary Union, even though most of the people agree that we need to improve it because it doesn't work very well. So it's also looking at exploring different ways of integrating further. It can be more market-based integration, it can be creating more institutional forms of integration, solidarity forms of integration. It can be only restricted to Eurozone countries or more open to other countries. And in this respect, the question of Brexit also changes a bit the debates on the EMU in EMU reform, because the EMU members become much more important as part of the EU members. And also there is much more tension between EMU and non-EMU members, meaning that the non-EMU members after the exit of the UK will feel, or there is a perception that they are fears of losing a bit of influence in all regulation related with the single market. Then in the same working package we are going to work also on energy, on the energy policy field, because it's very different than the EMU policy field. It's much less salient and political terms. It doesn't touch upon sovereignty issues, and there are many different practices and examples of differentiation. So it's interesting to see how it works in this more functional area. And in the same working package also we will look at the external access to the single market, because there are different regimes of access to the single market, from the EEA, the economic area, that is the Norway regime, or the Swiss regime that is it's a bit more different, to customs union, to free trade agreements. It's different degrees of integration to the single market. This is something that now it's very much debated because of Brexit, and we always pose the question whether it is a good regime for the UK, but from an EU perspective it's also interesting to look at how these different regimes work, whether they are efficient, whether they guarantee legitimacy, accountability, and all these questions about differentiated integration.
We're going to focus on foreign policy, security policy, and defense policy, and the key is to look at how differentiated integration has been manifested in these policy fields, and how could it potentially contribute to these policy fields given the challenges that the EU is facing in the external environment in particular, and also what kind of risk differentiated integration might entail in these policy fields. There is a kind of a paradox, I would say, because differentiated integration has been often seen a very promising tool to be used in these policy fields, because we all know that foreign policy, security policy, defense policy cuts to the heart of national sovereignty. We have 28 member states with different strategic thinking, culture, security interests. So accommodate the heterogeneity of the member states and their interests. The differentiated integration has been seen as a key to move forward. But the paradox is that the EU has introduced in treaty changes several mechanisms to make differentiated integration possible in these fields, but they haven't really been used. So that's a kind of a paradox, why this is so, and I think this is a question we need to address. I think recently, perhaps the most important development has happened in the field of defense, where the permanent structured cooperation has now been launched. That's something was included in the Treaty of Lisbon. And this allows a group of member states to develop defense integration in a smaller group of member states. Now we have a very inclusive PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation, which means that almost all the member states are included. And actually what we might see is that there is differentiation within the PESCO, so different member states engage in different kind of projects. And the big question for that field is that to what extent that will be different than what we have had before, where we had a different kind of defense cooperation projects within the EU. Whether the PESCO is really a kind of a tool towards deeper integration in certain fields of defense.
What we are going to do in the work package is analyze to what extent in the area of freedom, security and justice, differentiation in terms of integration can apply in terms of effectiveness, in terms of democracy, and how this differentiation in this area help in order to create a more democratic European Union. Basically, we are going to focus in 4 specific issues, in 4 topics. The first one is asylum system. The second one is related with the Schengen intra-EU mobility. The third one is about cooperation with third countries, and the fourth one is about policy cooperation. So analyzing these 4 specific topics, we will try to know about the past and how differentiation was created in these 4 specific issues. We are going to try to analyze what is happening now in terms of differentiation, and finally, in order to know what can happen in the future. We are really interested in these 4 issues because we think that probably these 4 topics are right now very important for the European Union, and in some extent also is these 4 topics are very politicized in the European Union, and different political parties, different governments are really using them in order to create different groups inside the European Union.